2.12, the bureaucracy. Okay, so the federal bureaucracy is a hierarchical, large organization of executive branch employees. So basically, the bureaucracy is talking about the executive branch and kind of how it all trickles downward. So the agencies and departments instead of the president themselves, which we just talked about in the executive branch. So structure of the bureaucracy. The executive hierarchy is a vast structure of governing bodies headed by professional bureaucrats. That's what we just talked about. So cabinet secretaries. The president appoints them, and many of them need Senate confirmation. And most of them are part of the president's party and have experience in the field of which they're working. So the cabinet secretary of education or whatever, they usually are going to come from the president's party and have some sort of background in education. And here on page 219, we have a little graph table thing that shows president and Congress's interactions with the federal bureaucracy. Okay, so departments. The president oversees 15 departments. So the president oversees 15 departments, and they've been renamed and divided into multiple departments over time. The largest one is defense, and the cabinet secretary directs the department. And they are all paid the same, even though they do different things. And then these departments have agencies that divides the departments. They can also be called divisions, bureaus, offices, services, administrations, and boards. And the head of each agency, the director, is appointed by the president. Independent agencies are in the executive branch, but aren't connected to a department. That's why they're independent. And it's structured like this by Congress so that they avoid influence. And it's more complicated, but they can create policies with the enforcement of laws for very specific and unique things. Now, commission and government corporations, the independent commissions have a body or a board that has 5 to 7 members, and they have staggered terms. So the president cannot replace all of them at once. The book has a little example. For example, if the Federal Reserve Board was composed of members appointed by one president, they could boost re-election chances by manipulating the interest rate and artificially stimulating the economy as an election nears. Such an action would make the agencies and commissions political rather than neutral. So this is why we have staggered terms, and they're avoiding direct influence that way. Government corporations, that's a hybrid of a government agency and a private company. Tasks performed by the bureaucracy. So when Congress creates stuff, it defines an organization's mission. So when it creates the organization, it defines the mission. And the legislature gives the departments very broad goals and administers agencies and bureaucrats within the departments. The agencies are much more specific. And then independent regulatory agencies are even more specific. Now, writing and enforcing regulations. So legislations around surrounding departments often gives leeway for how the law is administered. And there's even more leeway for independent regulatory agencies and commissions. For example, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, they have a lot of authority with enforcing the Clean Water Act. That's a piece of legislation set by Congress. That's how it works. Now, enforcements and fines, regulatory agencies, commissions, boards, they can all impose fines and punishments. And usually they're targeting industries or companies, not individuals. They also do this thing called compliance monitoring. So basically they're making sure those firms and companies are subject to industry regulations, and they're monitoring that the companies are complying. Compliance monitoring. Okay, so testifying before Congress. Cabinet secretaries and agencies directors are usually experts in that sort of field, and so they will often appear before congressional committees to provide testimonies to whatever's happening. Now, iron triangles and issue networks. This is the relationship between agencies, congressional committees, and an interest group. That's an iron triangle. And if those 3 points of the triangle, they create a policy when they join forces. And it's often very collectively beneficial. So the bureaucrats, they have an incentive to cooperate with the congressional members who fund and oversee those agencies. The committee members have an incentive to pay attention to interest groups because that provides them with policy information, and they can they're rewarded with donations. And interest groups and agencies have similar goals from the start, and they can criticize special interests not for common good. Oh, people will criticize them because they're like, this is very for special interest then, because it's like interest groups, not necessarily for like the common good when we're working for that. That's a criticization that people have. And I know that all sounded very messy and confusing, but luckily, if you take a look at page 224, you get a nice little iron triangle. If you're taking notes and you need to know this, I would look at this. The other stuff I just talked about is really a mess. If you understand that, then great, but this, it simplifies it so nicely. And then issue networks, those include committee staffers, academics, advocates, leaders of think tanks, interest groups, and or media, and they collaborate to create specific policies. So we went from patronage to merit. Now, patronage is giving people jobs because the people in charge like them. So like, I like you, I'm gonna give you a job. Usually, I like you because you're part of my party, and I'm like gonna give you a federal job because now I'm like the president or something. And then the spoil system is the president appointing people and expecting loyalty in return. So I'm going to appoint you, but then you have to be loyal to me. Then we ended up with a whole bunch of civil service reform, because obviously that's not very fair. People began to want a good government over a government of like friends and family of like whoever's in charge. So there were a whole bunch of like moral-based movements that encouraged like taming the spoil system and kind of like stopping it. People wanted fairness. Congress passed laws to authorize the president to create like rules and regulation for civil service. And then Garfield's assassination brought a lot of attention to these extreme cases of patronage and encouraged more legislation. The dude who assassinated Garfield had previously been like, appoint me to like an office, appoint me to an office. And Garfield was like, no. So the Pendleton Civil Service Act prevents constant reward to loyalty members, and that created the merit system. This includes a competitive written exams for many job applicants. So people who are getting these jobs now have to be like able and actually good applicants. Then the Civil Service Commission. This is like a bipartisan commission, and it oversees the process of all of this and prevents federal employees from contributing to political campaigns. The establishment of the civil service and regular economy and care for the needy brought the modern administrative state that we have today, and the bureaucratic system is now stocked with qualified experts, which improves the effectiveness of the bureaucracy. So the Civil Service Reform Act, this altered how a bureaucrat is dismissed. It limited veteran preference to balanced genders, upper level appointments by president, altered all of that stuff, and it promoted merit and performance, but it did give the president more power over all of this stuff. And this is 1978, because there are multiple civil service acts and all that. Or maybe I'm confusing that with something else. Anyway, Office of Personnel Management, this replaced the Civil Service Commission. They run the merit system and coordinate the federal application process. It promotes the idea of public service, and although this is like a thing, the OPM, many larger or established agencies will do their own hiring. And then the National Performance Review, NPR, this is like a review of the government, federal government. And this is a key document for Clinton, at least, in assessing the federal bureaucracy. It was organized to identify problems and solutions and ideas for government spending. A group focused on less paperwork and more discretionary responsibility, made tons of recommendations on how we can change things. Thank you. I hope this helped.